How secure your personal information is on social media networks increasingly depends on where in the world you live. The Facebook breach did lead Canada's Privacy Commissioner to launch an investigation, but it's not clear what, if anything, the consequence will be. Today, the Prime Minister seemed to put the onus to protect privacy on social media companies.
What we need is for those companies to assume the responsibilities that come with that power.
Legislators in the European Union are not leaving it up to the companies. A new law called the General Data Protection Regulation comes into force at the end of May. The new regulations will apply to any company operating from any country, including Facebook, if it handles personal information of EU citizens. Companies will need clear consent from users to collect their data, explaining how it will be used and for how long, as well as allowing users to easily withdraw consent. Companies will have to give notification of any data breaches within 72 hours. And companies failing to comply face stiff penalties of up to 20 million euros, about $32 million, or 4% of their global revenue, whichever is higher. The regulations look like a good template for Canada and the U.S. to follow, says this culture and technology professor.
I think that there needs to be a real hard look at what kinds of data these companies are collecting, exactly how it's being used, how it can be a potential harm. And I think the EU is a good precedent.
During his mea culpa interview on CNN last night, even Facebook's CEO acknowledged regulation may be needed.
I actually think the question is more, what is the right regulation rather than yes or no, should it be regulated?
In the EU, that's already been decided. The question now is whether its regulations will be liked by other countries too. Ron Charles, CBC News, Toronto.
So Ron talked about Europe's new regulations. Well, Austrian lawyer Max Schrems has been pushing for those since 2011 after he asked Facebook for all the data they had on him and got a pretty surprising answer. Facebook gave Schrems a CD with 1,200 files on it. It had kept records of the IP addresses of every computer he ever used to access Facebook, a full history of his messages and chats, his status updates, his wall posts, and even email addresses culled from his friends' address books. Schrems has since become a privacy activist and a founder of Europe versus Facebook. So tonight, Max Schrems told us online when we asked that if he were to ask for that information right now, that CD would be significantly larger, that Facebook collects even more data now. As for Mark Zuckerberg, he seems willing, as you heard, to consider the idea of regulation, but how real is that?
There are things like ads transparency regulation that I would love to see.
Zuckerberg was talking about a bipartisan bill that's already being considered in the U.S. Congress, the Honest Ads Act. It was introduced last year and would require digital companies to disclose who purchases political ads.
But if you look at how much regulation there is around advertising on TV and print, it's just not clear why there should be less on the internet.
That sounds just a little odd for those who followed Facebook's original push for that loophole.
There's a history here. Going back to 2011, Facebook went to the Federal Election Commission and asked for an exemption from existing disclaimer requirements. They actively fought against the application of existing transparency requirements to digital political ads, and they were successful.
Meanwhile, the Honest Ads Act has been dead in the water, thanks at least in part to Facebook.
Mark Zuckerberg is saying one thing publicly while his army of lobbyists is doing something entirely differently behind the scenes in the halls of Congress.
The bill so far has the support of just 18 U.S. senators.